the speakers for today. We will have Mr. Amjad Atallah, the Managing Director of Doha Debates, Deputy Managing Director, Mr. Jigar Mehta, Executive Producer of Digital, Catherine Darmody, and then we will have their Ihssane Ben Alluch, European Union Goodwill Ambassador, and one of the youth leaders of Design Post-COVID Humanity Program, Ta'aruf, Ta'awun, and Tarahum Initiative. So I don't want to take more time, but I would like to actually pass the stage to my colleague, Dear Jigar, who will be taking over from this section onwards. Dear Jigar, please, you have the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be joining you all today from San Francisco, California. That's why it's nice and bright behind me. And to be guiding us through a conversation for the next little bit. And in this conversation today, we're really going to be talking about the value of being audience first in our approach. And really, an opportunity for us on the Doha debate side to talk a little bit more about how we relaunched our initiative over the last 2 years and kind of the journey that we've taken as an organization to really be audience first in our approach. And then we're going to also bring in our other guest, Ihssane, to really talk about how she has built her organization and her social media accounts and profiles and her approach on audience as well. And then really to open it up to a conversation with you, the audience, to really dig into what are the techniques and ideas and topics that you're thinking about, especially as we enter into a post-COVID world, which I'm grateful that we are heading towards that space. So before I bring in my colleagues from Doha Debates, I actually wanted to, because many of you might not be familiar with what Doha Debates is or does yet. Hopefully you will be by the end of this conversation. But I wanted to actually start off by showing you a small trailer for Doha Debates. So I'm going to just share my screen and here from our YouTube channel, which you should be subscribers to if you're not already. All right, here we go.
Now, our aim is to take on some of the world's most divisive, most contentious issues.
Before meeting you, I believed that Islam was this violent, hateful religion.
Nosotros como jóvenes sí nos sentíamos como con esta pues libertad súper coartada donde no te podías mover.
AI and data colonialism is here. We must fight these trends before it's too late.
It's important to map these informal settlements. So when you're engaging the government, you're able to tell them this is the problem that we have in the community.
Governments should guarantee our fundamental rights.
We vote, we march, we think, we boycott, we teach, we write, we sing, we debate.
9 p.m. is going on, which they announced today.
It's good news. Let it go a little bit longer. Well, fantastic. That's just to give you a little taste of what Doha Debates, the kind of content that we produce. But I think it's actually important if we go to Amjad and actually talk about.
Go to your GPCH, go and click that button down. It's going to take you to the site.
I'm just going to mute everybody as well, just to give ourselves a little bit more clear audio. Great. Amjad, I want to come to you and actually hoping that you might be able to share with the audience a bit about the actual story of Doha Debates and how we actually relaunched the program. People might not even be familiar that this was originally a show that started off on the BBC in 2005. So I'm hoping that you might be able to give people a little bit of background on the program.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank HBKU for inviting us and for us allowing us to be part of this exciting opportunity. Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem to everyone who's celebrating. And greetings. I'm in the traditional homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the lands of the Paswa Yaku tribe, otherwise known today as Tucson, Arizona. And this is actually a very exciting opportunity because it was only a few years ago. The original Doha debate started in 2005, and it was a BBC program that was hosted by the remarkable journalist Tim Sebastian, and he was he also hosted a show called Hardball, which still exists on BBC, and the show was an Oxford Union style show, and it went from 2005, I think, until 2011, a remarkable span of time, and it was based in Doha, in Education City, and it used an Oxford Union style form of debate to discuss very specifically Middle Eastern issues. Now, when we were asked to help the Qatar Foundation figure out how to re-envision and reimagine and restart this effort, we decided to start, as Jigar said, with an audience-first approach. The original show had created a remarkable space for free speech and discussion of controversial topics in Doha that had not existed in the Gulf region at all up until that time. And so there was a strong foundation that we wanted to build on, but we also wanted to find out that the world had changed, the media landscape had changed, the way people consumed information and content had changed, and the audience that normally now watches 24/7 news channels is my age and older, and the audience that we were designed and created for are Generation Z and for young millennials. And so the best way to start for us was to actually go to those audiences first and have conversations with them. And so we actually, before this project even started, we began conversations with groups of young people in New Delhi, in Doha, in London, in New York, and in Washington, DC. And we spent a week with each of these groups of people. So they weren't really focus groups as much as they were long-term conversations where we sat with them and we sat with their friends and we sat with their relatives, and we discussed what are the issues that they're interested in, what are the topics that concern them the most, and how do they engage. Who do they listen to? Who do they consider strong voices? And this approach that we took actually, I think, was very consistent with what we were hearing from the Qatar Foundation and from its leadership and from Her Excellency Sheikha Hind, who has talked publicly about a similar model towards education, a model that's student first. And we wanted to do a similar thing with an audience-first approach to how we could actually reach these audiences. And what we found from those conversations were that, in fact, the world is much more globalized, and Generation Z is much more globalized than any of the generations before. And the interactions that they have with each other cross nationalities, they cross boundaries, they cross cultures, they cross genders. The kind of interactions that people have are not only based on physical spaces, they're based on virtual spaces. And so when we started constructing Doha debates, we wanted to take all of those things into account. We wanted to take into account the fact that Qatar had become an international space for mediation and arbitration, whether it's the talks between the United States and Afghanistan, whether it's trying to resolve civil strife in Sudan or among the Palestinian parties or in Lebanon. Qatar had established itself much as Norway or Switzerland have as a country that's trying to bring arguing parties together and trying to help them move forward. And then the third element that we wanted to bring into it was the fact that in the region itself, there's the concept of the Majlis. There is the concept of consensus building, debating, and discussing in a very respectful format in an attempt to try to get to consensus, which is a very different model than what's developed on 24/7 news channels over the last 5-6 years, which has been gladiator sport of having people sitting across from each other and effectively yelling at each other or arguing vehemently with each other, and with no hope of them actually agreeing on anything, because their point is to create spectacle. It's to create conflict. It's to create, like we say, gladiator sport. And so we designed, even our set that we designed for the Doha debate was actually designed with these themes in mind, with these themes of inclusion, with an audience centered approach. And as a matter of fact, even the architectural components of the set were designed to actually reflect the architecture of Doha. And so what we were trying to do is create something that was authentically from the region, but global in its scope and global in its outreach. And so I think what it's meant has been that we've not only started with a debate show, but it's meant that we realized that we had to have a podcast. It meant that we also had to have a social media presence. It meant that we have to produce short films and create short films that can reach a wide audience. It meant that we needed to create curriculum for teachers that was based on the debates, that was based on the films, that was based on the podcasts. So it required us to be very flexible and to continue to be flexible, because it's not as if we can just adopt one model and stick with it, because the audience may change. You know, if Instagram is where everybody is today, it may not be where they are tomorrow. I mean, TikTok may be where everybody is. Where is it that people are having these conversations? We have to be flexible enough to be able to go to them. We have to be flexible enough to engage with them. And the most important part is we have to always be listening, because if we're not paying attention to what they want and what the audience is listening to, what the audience cares about, then we're not going to be able to serve our mission.
Great. And so you've done a fantastic job of articulating what was the launch strategy. Like, this is what we want to do. This is the reason we're doing it. This is how we should do it. Okay, now we're going to hand it over to Katrine. This is a perfect time to bring Katrine into the conversation. Katrine Dermody, our EP of digital, one of our first hires on the project as well, and said, this is the vision. You have 0 on Twitter, 0 on Facebook, 0 on Instagram, 0 on YouTube. Build it. How do you do it? Where do you start? What's the approach?
Katrine needs you to unmute her.
Oh, I need to unmute, yes.
Hello, thank you, Jigar, and thank you, Amjad, for a very thorough introduction to all the things that Doha Debates is. Yeah, you know, I've spent the last few days knowing that we were going to do this, thinking about the very early days before Doha Debates was officially relaunched, but it was a reality in all of our minds, right? And, you know, I think we launched Doha Debates before there was a debate. We were launching an idea, I think is the big thing. We knew we wanted to be audience first. And so, you know, we knew that we wanted to create, we didn't know, I didn't know what our content was going to look like or sound like necessarily, but I think we knew we wanted to make content. We knew who we wanted to be watching our content, to be engaging with our content, to be asking questions of our content. And a big part of where we started was, you know, elevating other people's voices. That has been something that's central to everything we've done in the last 2.5+ years. And sort of amazing to me that some of the very first videos we made could be made today too. We haven't, you know, a lot of where we started, the DNA of that hasn't changed. I think we've just built on it. So to Amjad's point, you know, we did a lot of research before relaunching into the types of issues that young people were interested in, and the types of angles on those issues and the tone in which we talk about those issues. And we knew that we wanted to not only contextualize them, because I think that's really important, and to be part of an education foundation, I think that's central to what we do. But beyond just contextualizing an issue or identifying an issue, we wanted to identify and engage with people and communities who were working to solve those problems in big ways and small ways. And that really carries through, everything that we've done. I think I think we launched all of our social channels all at once, with, what Jigger said, with 0 followers everywhere, which is for any of the writers out there, you're looking at a blank page. And if you're a glass half full person, you see it as nothing but opportunity. A glass half empty person, maybe it makes you shaking your boots a little bit. And I think I personally felt both of those things. Starting from scratch, from a completely fresh start, means that we had a little bit of time where we got to experiment for a little while and see what we thought worked, what we really liked, what we thought was engaging content, without risking too much. And I think that experimental spirit is still alive and well in a lot of what we do. We keep sort of launching new series, we keep hosting new debates around new ideas. And I think we're always trying to find sort of a fresh perspective on those things. And I think all of our content at least tries to embrace that.
I'm hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about the early stages where, we did have that early set of data and we were looking at trends and we had a sense of what the audience was, but we had no audience. How do you predict what the audience is going to respond to in that early stage? Is it based on previous work? Is it an experimental mindset? I wonder if you can talk about maybe the early days of trying to build audience.
Sure. Yeah. So 2 things. One, we had sort of a 2-pronged challenge in front of us, which was trying to create editorial content that would resonate with the audience that we wanted to build, sort of a build it and they will come strategy. But we also had the challenge of relaunching a brand that was very well known in a lot of areas and relaunching it in a way that was completely reimagined. So we had to talk about ourselves being Doha Debates as if you've never heard of Doha Debates before, or to a large group of people who had been like really big fans of the original Doha Debates, and explain how that was different. And so those 2 things were not necessarily competing priorities, but definitely 2 things that we tried to balance all at the same time. On a more practical level, I think one of the strategies that we deployed, in addition to, as Amjad said, meeting our audiences where they weren't yet there, but where we wanted them to be, is, for all of our content, we didn't just sort of like put stories out there. I think we tried to frame in every way possible sort of calls to action within our content. So when we were putting out a video on Twitter, for instance, we would publish it, but we'd also be asking like our audience, like, what do you think about this? If there's a central question to a video we're publishing and producing, we would be asking, sort of soliciting engagement, soliciting questions, soliciting responses from our Twitter followers, from our YouTube followers and Facebook followers and Instagram followers. And everything that we do, from the big shiny debates that we host to smaller tweets, everything that we do, we try to, I think, weave this thread of letting our audience know that we care about them, that we care about their thoughts and feelings, that we try and incorporate sometimes literally their messages into our live shows and things like that. And so I think, we started with that at the heart of what we do. And I think we've been consistent with that over the last few years. And I think we, time and time again, try and show our audience how much we appreciate them, how much we want to hear from them, how much we want their feedback, their ideas. We ask people to send us story ideas, pitch us films, all of these things that, we hope that our audience members are seeing their ideas reflected in our work and sometimes inspiring our work. And so I think that in doing that consistently and continuing to engage with our audience everywhere we are helps drive that, and it also helps us predict and then honestly know what they want to hear more of and see more of.
Lots and lots of feedback loops, and lots of eyeballs and earballs listening to what is happening out in the world. I think this actually is a really great point to actually bring in our other panelists, Ihssane Alluch, who is joining us from, I believe, Morocco. Great. A little bit about her. She is a Moroccan social media content creator. She's a journalist and a travel vlogger on YouTube. And as was mentioned in the earlier remarks, she's also the Goodwill Ambassador to the European Union from Morocco. And I think that's fantastic. And most importantly, which I loved in her bio, her top priority is the youth and the environment. So not a bad day to be having a conversation with you on Earth Day, which should be every day, as we know, because there's nothing more critical, and I want you to talk about this as well, than climate to our future, right, and future generations. I really want to, I'm fascinated by this, like the early days and the beginning, and you also had to start your Instagram and YouTube accounts at zero. And talk to us about the early days and how you thought about, this is what I want to create content in these spaces, and how you approached the early days.
Yeah. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. This is Ihssane bin Alluch. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in such a great event with amazing leaders. I know that I only have like 5 to 7 minutes, right? But I will make it quick. Well, like before starting to talk or to answer this question about how did I start, I want actually to start my speech by answering the question why I think audience first approach is very important in conveying messages in media. So then I will tell you my stories. Due to my experience on social media, I have been recently producing content to eliminate stereotypes in society and to change the way that people think in terms of coexistence with different views, abilities, and values. So example of this, if you go to my YouTube channel, you will find a series of videos called تحدي مع إحسان, which means challenge with Ihssane. So this program, I was working on challenging myself first to change the perspective and the stereotypes that I have about a lot of differences that are around us, of course, and then let people change theirs as well. So when I say differences, what I mean by that, it's not only about like the cultures and nationalities, etc. It's about also people with that are suffering from the way that we are looking at them. You know what I mean? It's people with disabilities, for example, people with Down syndrome, people with autism, and more. So I made some 3 episodes with these 3 differences that I mentioned, where I was spending a day with them. It's like a vlog, and at the same time, it's a documentary. So I was listening to their success stories, not only stories, because they were empowering youth by their amazing work. And I was actually using my platform to make their voices heard. So people can really do something, it's a call to action, so they can change their stereotypes about them. After that, I started receiving many messages from different people around the MENA and North Africa region, telling me their stories so we can, let's say, build all together more disability-friendly societies and to promote coexistence. So not only that, before like doing this episodes, I was working on my Instagram, not an Instagram account, on my YouTube channel on promoting volunteerism, encouraging youth to try this amazing work, because I believe volunteering, we can build by a better community. And so far we can help by volunteering our countries as well and the world. So whenever I'm doing something on social media, well, when I started doing social media, I didn't know what to do exactly with it, because a huge platform, and then I was just like looking for the opportunity to do what I think is right. But a few years later, I found that I can do both: listen to the audience plus do what I think is right, and make them together. For example, as I mentioned before, people, they enjoy seeing the vlogs. What I can do by doing vlogs, I don't want to share my daily vlogs. I can do like challenging myself with changing the stereotypes about this topics that I've mentioned before. And then it's a documentary, because I'm a journalist at the same time. It's a vlog. It's fun for youth. So whenever I'm doing something on social media, I always give my audience the chance to interact and to make their voices heard, because I participated in a lot of events, and people, they were asking me, how did you do that? We want to do something like that. We want to have the chance to communicate or to participate in this kind of campaigns. So I want them to do it as well, because I believe in them. So that's why I shared with them the link so they can watch this session that we are doing now. Also, I've shared with them many campaigns, like One Word campaign. It was with the UN. Anatomy of Action campaign was with the UNEP. We Are Committed campaign with Masdar. Kulna Khut, it was a Moroccan for blood donation campaign. Global Money Week campaign as well, where we were sharing some people's stories on how they can use their money wisely and why saving money is important, etc. So we have a lot of important topics to talk about, with a lot of similarities, different points of views, but it's really great to include also youth to talk and interact in different languages, not only in English, using social media. If we are looking for youth, of course, we will find them on social media, which means internationalize people's voices and stories. And this is what I call audience first approach. For example, today I shared on my Insta stories asking youth to watch this session and to share with me what are their ideas and suggestions for what do you want to talk about. This is what I've mentioned in Arabic. And then the answers, each answer is different from another. I've received many answers, and I know that I don't have much time to talk about everything, but let me just briefly tell you what the answers were. For example, they have mentioned mental health, education and educational guidance, justice, safety, human rights and women's rights, children's rights, refugee rights, poverty, also create employment opportunities, climate change, and more. So at the end, I'm asking the audience, if they are watching us on YouTube, to please leave a comment. How do they want to make their voices heard, so we can all be on the same table and learn from each other. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity one more time. Thank you.
That's really great. Thank you. Yeah, and I think a great call to action as well for those of us, for those of you who are watching from around the world on YouTube. Let us know where you're watching from, and if there's questions for the panel, please be sure to start asking them, and we'll get to those questions after I get through my questions, because I have a lot of interesting questions I have to ask all of you all. Amjad, I want to come to you for a second. And just, you've had your career was in news before coming to Doha Debates. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how this project is different because you've launched many things before, in NGOs, news channels, social media channels, and this is a different project. I wanted to know if you could maybe talk about some of the things that was different in launching Doha Debates than, let's say, launching a news property.
I think the biggest, and to keep it short, the biggest difference is that with Doha Debates and in the conversations that we've had with young people, Nobody wants to be told, if you're 20 years old, the last thing you want to hear is that the world is coming to an end by the time you're 30, right? Nobody wants to hear that there's no hope for the future. But when you're in the news, you're reporting on the disasters that are happening right now. You're reporting on the disasters as a daily, this like a daily litany of disaster, which can actually, in a way, and it's not intended to, but it can remove agency from you. It can remove your ability to have hope. It can remove your ability to believe in change. With Doha debates, the biggest difference, I think, is the aspirational quality of making sure it's exactly what Ihssane's talking about in terms of the conversations she's having. They're hopeful conversations. They're conversations about how you're making things better. They're conversations about what people are doing in their own lives. Even when you spoke about talking about abled and disabled, you don't talk about just the challenges, you talk about the successes. And that's exactly, I think, the types of conversations that we also are having. And one other element, and we did, I think, we all worked with Al Jazeera in some various capacity in the past, and Al Jazeera has been very good at this as well. But one of the things, when you have an audience first approach, it means diversity, because your audience is global. Your audience includes probably a majority of women. And you cannot have as your subject matter, as your content, you cannot have white men of a particular age only being the subjects of every conversation, because that is bias that you're introducing into a global format. If you switched it, if it was audience first, then it's women's voices that are the predominant ones that are being heard everywhere in the world. It's all the intersectionality. It's people. It's the abled, the disabled. It's the it's having people with from the global South. It's having people from the Middle East. It's having people from Asia, and having them speak not just about topics in India or topics in Doha or topics in Nigeria. You're having them talk about the topics that they actually care about and work on at an equal level with somebody from London, with somebody from Washington, with somebody from New York. And so that diversity, I think, is also something that we've baked into Doha debates, but it's something, if anybody who wants an audience first approach has to, I think, reflect that diversity.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot myself. I mean, Amjad, you and I are remember a time when we were working in a newsroom, coming together at a table and deciding what the order of what was the most important news of the day, whether it be read or printed on the front page, and that was what people would see as the news. And now we're in an era where anybody around the world has this ability and the tools to be able to become their own conveyors of information and directly to build their own audience. And Ihssane, I was hoping that you might be able to talk about, were you aware of the power that, that the power structure had completely changed with these new platforms, and that you didn't have to go to the national broadcaster or the national newspaper to start building an audience, that you could do it directly yourself?
Yeah. When I was young, I was like hoping that I can be a journalist on TV one day, but choose another path. It's social media. I didn't expect that, like to grow that way. I didn't expect that social media one day would be like that. Will everyone need it as much as we need it now? I think now, like everything is changing, now we have social media, but after 10 to 20 years maybe we will have something else. That's why as Mr. Amjad mentioned, we have to be flexible with everything, especially when you have a lot of audience from a lot of the countries. Let's say I have to follow them, so like I don't want them to follow me, but I want to follow them to go to the platform where we can find youth, of course. Yeah.
We have some great questions coming in. I'm going to get to them in a second. I want to know, do you have a team that works with you? Are you doing this on your own? How does all this content get generated?
Well, that's a great question. And so let me say that I'm doing all this work by myself. Sometimes my younger sister, she's helping me, but of course collaborating with some NGOs, some foundations, you know, but like the work I'm sharing, it's all done by me in terms of script, in terms of voiceover, and you know how it is like very hard to do all this together by yourself. So it takes me like 7 days to just produce one video with the editing, with everything, like I have to make sure that the information are all right, because you know it's a platform where people, where I'm building a trust with young people. So I have to make sure everything is perfect. That's why sometimes it took me months to just produce a video on YouTube, but on Instagram it's easier.
I mean, you've amassed an audience that rivals many local and even national news outlets, especially here in the U.S., which is impressive. Katrine, I mean, I want to talk to you about this because, you know, our approach at Doha Debates is very different in the sense that we're essentially a brand, an organization, as opposed to an individual. I'd love for you to talk about, you know, some of the benefits of that, but also some of the challenges, especially in creating content.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's an entirely different way to think about something when you're putting a message out there that's not like Katrine speaking to the world. It's Doha Debates speaking to the world. And there's, you know, I think there's a great amount of responsibility in both of those approaches. For better or worse, we get to or have to sort of play both instruments, as it were, because we do have personalities that are part of our team. We have Nelifar Hidayat, who is our digital correspondent. And of course, you know, we have other people associated with the debates and things like that. And so, you know, those people, you know, I hope that the Doha Debates team helps them. But, you know, a lot of the time when they're in the social spaces, they're out there, you know, like you, sort of representing themselves, and then often they're out there representing a brand, and those can be two very different and maybe even competing things sometimes. You know, I think on the one hand, the sort of the social media producer approach is a better fit for certain platforms. I think we've seen, like in the YouTube space, for instance, having a real personality and, you know, I say a face, but really it's the person who like the YouTube audience is connecting with, I think is a much more natural fit in a lot of ways than like a brand trying to occupy that space and have those same connections with an audience. You know, that said, I think from a brand perspective, we have the ability to sort of have a broader approach and have sort of like series that we're working on that can feature different people in them, or, you know, different things like that. So, you know, I think that's a challenge that we grapple with, that we're continuing to grapple with as we try and grow our audience in the YouTube space. Whereas, you know, I think Instagram, where you can absolutely use sort of that same strategy, I think with Instagram, we've been able to find more success in making sure we're creating really visually beautiful content that doesn't necessarily have to be as personality driven. So it's definitely something we're thinking about all the time. And I'm sure it's something that you're thinking about as well.
I mean, it's a fascinating time to be a content creator. And I think, you know, it's, you know, we're even at Doha Debates thinking about, wow, like how do we present ourselves on TikTok or on other platforms? And there's so much, I think what we're learning is that we really have to work with other content creators and other brands and other organizations to really leverage audiences, and that it's a win-win for everybody, as opposed to dividing up the same market share that we might have had in the old world, right? There's some great questions coming in from YouTube. I'm going to go to those because honestly, they're better than the questions that I prepared, which is always the case. This was actually an important one because we discussed this a bit in our pre-planning as a panel. How do we tackle the language barrier in conversations? And this is a perfect example. We're having this conversation in English. that's my primary language. I know it's not the primary language for everybody, and everyone is flexing to meet where I am. So I thank you. But as Doha Debates, we create a lot of content in English, but we are incorporating other voices. But the world is complex, and the world speaks a lot of languages. How are we approaching tackling the language barrier? Anyone can take that one on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Katrine. Or Ihssane, I know that you had I think one of the biggest advantages, of course, is that, Ihssane is, I think, trilingual and at least trilingual. And so this is a huge advantage in content creation, especially outside of the United States, where people tend to only be monolingual. But please, Ihssane, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I just want to add something that because whenever I'm sharing something in English, I always receive many questions. People, they want to interact as well, but there is this language barrier. They cannot understand everything, or they cannot interact because they cannot understand what we are saying. But still, it is really important for them to interact. But that's why I think the question that I'm addressing to you, Mr. Amjad, do you think, for example, we can create a Doha debate for, let's say, for Arabic version, where there is, let's say, many people from the Arabic countries, Middle East and North Africa, where they can interact as well, like Doha debates Arabic, and there is Doha debate English, and why not Doha debate French, and with many languages, so we can listen to all the voices of everyone around the world, and so we can understand them very well. What do you think, Mr. Amjad?
No, I think that's definitely a possibility. I think that's definitely a desire, right? And it's a possibility that I think something that, and it's, in our experience, for example, with AJ Plus, we launched it and it started in English, and then there was an AJ Plus that followed that was in Arabic. And I think that, it's very possible that that the Doha Debates also does that. But one of the things that we're also trying to do is to use all of the abilities that technology offers us to also allow our content that we produce, not just the actual debate show, but the other content that we produce, to also be in multiple languages. So, and to use, to use subtitling, and to use, so we can have subjects who are speaking in Spanish, in one of our films. We can have a subject who's speaking in Arabic, in our films. And so I think there's a space where we can actually mix it together, because the new reality allows us to do that. And there are places where, for example, in our stage shows or things like that, where it might be possible to imitate the format in multiple languages, in Arabic, in French, etc. But yeah. I think Katrine, you were about to say something, I thought.
Yeah, no, that's a great sort of segue, or I guess, I think one of the strategies we've deployed is sort of we have to establish like what Doha Debates is, what our tone of voice is, what our style is. We have a living document that's our style guide that says like what words we use and don't use for certain things. I think we're still in the sort of beginning phases, even though we've been around now for a little over 2 years, almost 3 years, where we're starting to get to a point where I think we really are understanding who we are as this English first program. And who knows, maybe there is a Doha Debates Arabic, Doha Debates French, Doha Debates Spanish in our future. That would be super, super exciting. In the meantime, I think what we're trying to do is sort of keep getting better at making our content as accessible as possible. Part of that is making things available in different languages. For all of our published content, we provide subtitles and closed captions in English. We also have them translated into Arabic as well. And while that doesn't cover all of the languages that are out there, it's a start. And I think that's where we're starting, and we'll keep building on it. And then the other thing I wanted to add is, sort of in a similar vein, we are always trying to make our content more accessible, even beyond language. One of our sort of big, I think, values at Doha Debates is centered around disability justice. So for our live shows, we've incorporated live closed captioning, which are then translated later. We have a series called My Disability Justice, which is a series of 3 short films that included sign language interpretation as well. And so, every image that we publish on our various social platforms, we try and include alternate text. So people who, can't see the image, for instance, can experience it still. And so, one thing to know, and I'm sure, for those of us watching who have created content ever, you certainly know this as someone who is making all of her content all by herself. This stuff takes a lot of time, but we are definitely dedicating the time. This is something we think is really important. And so I think with every day and week and month and year that passes and, going forward, I think we're just going to keep trying to get better at that. And I would even say try to be on the cutting edge of things like that and getting into pilot projects where we can make our content more and more and more accessible.
Well, I do have another question. If you let me just say, yeah, because I received this question before. Do you have any platform where youth can give their suggestions about this global issues that we were talking about? Do you have any platform, for example, on social media where they can put all these details, with the solutions and everything, because in different languages, why not? So we can learn from them, and then why not take the most common global issue and talk about it in Doha Debates? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, Katrine, please, tell her about actually, it's a good segue with Dr. Talk mentioning our hashtag Dear World, our hashtag Dear World campaign and the Solving It series.
Yeah, I think we do have sort of an outreach. It's not a program because it's sort of just something we do everywhere, every day. But yes, we definitely turn to our audience for their feedback on things. This past year, because of the pandemic, our debate schedule and debate topics completely changed from what we thought it was going to be. But in the year before, we reached out to our audiences on Twitter and elsewhere to say, what are the topics that are most important to you? What should we be talking about? What do you not want to hear any more about? And so we definitely incorporated a lot of that feedback into our thoughts about what topics we would be debating that year. To Amjad's point, we have a series on Instagram called Solving It, hashtag Solving It. And it's a weekly illustration series that focuses on people, mostly young people, but people across the world who are doing very cool and important work towards solving big global issues. So it could be an environmental activist in Bali, or someone fighting for gender equality rights in Texas. Every week we try and we try and highlight someone who's doing great work, and we actually have a Google form that solicits nominations. To be honest with you, I would love to receive more nominations than we get. But so, if you have any ideas, we want to know, there's a lot of people doing amazing work out there in fields that I may never have heard of, or that none of us have heard of, but you might. And so, I think our hope is always that our audience feels like there's that open channel of communication. And honestly, it helps us to get all of those fresh ideas and to be able to turn them into something. So I think we'll continue doing that and, find other avenues for our audience to get back to us.
The world is quite large, 7 billion people. There are so many stories to be told and so little time that it's important for all of us to be storytellers, to keep telling stories, to keep getting more information out about, the more people are exposed to different stories, the more they feel compelled to tell their own story, which I think is the diversity in the diversity in opinions and voices is so critical to having thoughtful conversation and dialogue. There's some really good questions. I want to make sure that we have probably about 10 more minutes remaining in this conversation that I want to make sure that we get to. Ihssane, this is a question for you is, do you think the youth is now overusing YouTube and other types of social media, that they might be thinking about it too much as a career option? Is this a career?
Well, I think it is for some people. Yes, it is. It's a full-time job, yes, for a lot of families, but still there is not a lot of control of what they are sharing on social media. Sometimes, there is a lot of content that must not be shared on social media because there's kids that are watching this content, and of course they are like the terms influencers, they are influencing these kids. That's why I think we have to control what we are sharing on social media. And alhamdulillah, I'm glad that there is many youth that are following me, even if my content is kind of different and difficult at the same time. But still, this is how I saw that there is a lot of people. They are looking for opportunities. They want their voices to be heard, as I mentioned before. They want to talk, they want to speak, they want to interact, but they're just looking for this opportunity. That's why I've asked you this question. Do you have like any plannings to create a Doha Debate Arabic version so they can interact as well? So please, can you give me all the info that I can share on my Insta stories for them to interact in English? Why not? And also in Arabic if there is a way, inshallah.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the best things is once we hear a demand from an audience to want content in a certain place or a certain style, that's great for us to be able to go back to our funders and say, hey, we see an opportunity here to expand the audience and to make that happen. It takes, unfortunately, as an organization, it takes longer than it does as an individual, right? And so these are the moments that we're in, but we're blessed to be able to even have these conversations. Katrine, this is a question. This has to be a plant. Someone must have planted this question, but it's a great question. How do you get someone who is stubborn to join an open conversation with one that they hate? How do you convince them not only to talk to them, but to actually listen? I think we might have something that might talk to that.
We do. We have an entire video series called Better Conversations that can help with that. And I will get to that in just a second. The first thing I will say, though, is that if what that question describes wasn't as difficult as it is, Doha Debates wouldn't exist. I think that, our main goal is to, whether it's through debates, whether it's through short films, a podcast, a Twitter feed, we are always trying to carve out space for different opinions to come together, for people to have conversations and not necessarily agree. I think we know that diversity of opinion can be a really good thing. I think that when you're having a conversation and sort of yelling past one another, however, or you go into a conversation with no intent to have an open mind or with even a sliver of an ability to maybe have part of your opinion change, you don't really get anywhere with that. And so I think that question is a really great one. It's something we all deal with on a personal level with our friends and family, politically, community to community, there are divisions everywhere. But to Jigar's point, we do have a 7-part series on our YouTube page called Better Conversations. That's hosted by Dr. Govinda Clayton, who is the connector in our Doha Debates. If any of you have watched Doha Debates, you'll recognize his face and his demeanor. He's an expert in peace and negotiation processes and has incredibly practical tips on how you can enter into a conversation and really get something out of it. He goes through, there's an entire episode on just listening, like how we can all be better listeners, and actual first do this, second do this. And I think, I think a lot of us might think we're listening when in fact we're maybe listening with the intent to respond rather than listening with the intent to have empathy or to digest what someone's saying. So I would definitely direct people to that. And, I would say for all the people that you may have had a difficult conversation with that left you frustrated or upset, you know, also think that we can all do better ourselves, right? We can all be better listeners. We can all probably articulate our ideas a little bit better. We can all come to something with a little bit more of an open mind. And that doesn't mean you need to change your opinion. It just means that you have to sort of engage in good faith. So yeah, one more time, I guess, to plug Better Conversations, you know, honestly, working on that project changed the way I interact with people. And I think it will with anyone who's dealing with that as well.
DohaDebates.com/Better Conversations. And it just got nominated for a Webby. So that's fantastic for the team. Time for 2 more questions. I think then we'll be reaching the top of the hour. Ihssane, this is a 2-parter. I'm going to add to it, but do you think COVID has played a role in creating more content creators?
Yes. Yeah. Because, you know, when you have nothing to do and you have your phone and your camera and everything, so of course you might be doing a lot of content. Still, me, like for the time of COVID, I've worked a lot of projects that I've mentioned before. This differences that I mentioned, I've done them only in during the pandemic. The Down syndrome challenge, the autism challenge, the disabilities, and more videos. I just filmed them all during this pandemic. So I had a lot of time to do. So of course, it created a lot of content creators. I don't know if it is a good thing or not, but still, it depends on the content that we are sharing. Yeah.
Great. And then where do you want to travel to first when you can?
Well, wow. To a lot of places. You know, because now it's been 1 year since I didn't, or 1 year and a half since I didn't travel to any other places. In 2020, before the pandemic or before the lockdown, I was in Azerbaijan. So it was my first time being there. And, you know, I've heard of this Corona thing while I was in Azerbaijan, and they were saying that the airports in Iran are closed. And so I started to believe, of course, the pandemic is coming to Morocco as well. So I took all my luggage and I came back to Morocco. But subhanallah, how things in only 1 year, everything has changed, right? Well, I wish that I can travel to Mecca, because I had this, I had this plan to go to Mecca last year, but subhanallah, it didn't happen. Why not after, inshallah? And of course, you in Qatar as well, and visit a lot of countries that I've never been there.
Yeah, I can't wait till we all can be back in Doha, having this conversation in real life. Well, and so the final question I want to answer before I hand it back over to Dr. Talk was, there was a question about how can global youth be part of Doha Debates products and initiatives? And I think the simplest answer to that is, please do follow our social accounts at Doha Debates, wherever you get your social media. And we do have a newsletter you can subscribe to at dohadebates.com/newsletter. And we have a lot of exciting things planned for 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023. So be the first to know by signing up for our newsletter. There's a really exciting one that we're going to be announcing in about 2 weeks. That is all about engaging young people around the world really directly. So keep an eye out for that. I want to thank everyone for taking some time today to share some great insights. I always learn so much from listening to so many fantastic content creators and the questions and from the audience. And with that, Dr. Talk, I'd like to hand it back over to you to wrap up our session.
Thank you so much, their Jigar and their Amjad and their Catherine and their Ihssane. It has been such a wonderful experience, and definitely I will watch the recording a couple of more times to better learn how to moderate sessions in the way you do there, Jigar. You're a role model for me right now. And so to finalize, to conclude, I just want to share with you, I believe I have 4 observations, 4 commonalities. We represent, I believe, 3 different perspectives today. One is definitely the really like a inspirational Ihssane and her work coming from Morocco, but with a global and regional international focus. Doha Debates, a strong brand with the capital of Qatar in it, and creating, like emanating from Qatar, but waving, transmitting knowledge and vibes to the rest of the world, such a global endeavor. And ours is like a university initiative, mostly youth driven. So 4 commonalities I was able to diagnose. Maybe I am not correct, but I'm happy to maybe discuss them in the future in maybe one of the episodes of Doha Debates, who knows. Number 1, I believe we all highlighted that the voice of the youth needs to be heard. And there's no one way to do it, but there are multiple ways, multiple languages, multiple techniques, multiple instruments to do that. Right before the COVID-19 emerged, we were on the verge of organizing an event, an activity with almost 200 students. And the title of the event was Building Youth Capacity for Global Policy Making. So that was actually an initiative to create this bottom-up approach, because we don't have to tell the youth what to do. They are in a position to cultivate their own perspectives and to create impacts, not only local or national, but global impact. So I believe that in one way or another, we all agree that the youth needs to build its own perspectives rather than being imposed on certain ideas. Now is the time for them to really unleash their own potential. This is one. Number 2, I believe it's very important that the voices need to be heard, but hearing each other is not enough. We need to connect. I believe Ihssane is doing it in a different way. Doha Debates is different in a global way. Maker Measures Design Post-COVID Humanity also tried to connect the youth in different ways. And not only that, we heard each other, we connected, but the third element, we are trying to deliver. We have a futuristic perspective. We don't want to save the day, but we want to save the next generations. And because we care about intergenerational democracy and justice. So these are critical elements that I believe we all share. And number 3, Ihssane is again, I believe, oscillating between the local and the global. Doha Debates, again, oscillating between the local and the global, which means that we are also doing the same thing. Maker Measures is using sustainable development goals. But let's not forget, in everything that is global, there is some level of localness in it. And everything that is local, there is a level of globalness embedded in it. So yes, now with globalization, I know that maybe there are 300 versions of French cheese or Swiss cheese, but I also know that what we suffer from, or what a person in sub-Saharan Africa is suffering from, is not essentially that different from a student in Somalia or in Sri Lanka or any part of the world. So which means that there is something global in the local and local in the global. And we all, these entities who were present today, I believe, is sharing this. And finally, number 4, being futuristic and the openness for new imaginations. In our opening ceremony in Design Post-COVID Humanity, we had the first Muslim astronaut, Mohammed Faris, with us, and he shared his story of how the world is seen from the universe. So I was gonna say that it's no longer actually, when I look at Ihssane, I see something for the future. When I look at Doha Debates, I see a light for the future. And Maker Measures is also similar in nature, I believe. And therefore, their world was a great start. But now with Tesla and other, now we are going to universe. Maybe in the future, we will be talking about the global goods or universal goods, maybe, that how capitalism is now kind of penetrating to the universe, right? So there are new dynamics. So maybe the next idea is the their universe. So, and one final anecdote, not many people know, I wanted to mention this whole universe, their universe, because when I first went to Canada, early ages, no one was able to pronounce my name correctly. And then I told them, look, just forget about my name. Let's just use my name, the meaning in English. My name means universe. So Evren means universe. So that is why if you say dear universe, it's going to be dear me. So I'll take it as an honor. And my surname, again, means someone who just ate something, someone full. I'm full. Evren talks. So universe is full, my name and surname. That is why people are telling me that I'm so obsessed with sustainable development goals and everything. So I just want to finish this funny anecdote. And thank you so much, everyone. Let's make sure that no one is hungry. Everyone is, universe is full. And let's make sure that the youth has more chance to unleash his or her potential. And I believe that with organizations like Doha Debates and efforts like Ihssane, we will accomplish our objectives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really funny, but I am hungry, by the way, because it's a
Me too.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you, everyone, and all listeners. Have a wonderful day and Ramadan Kareem.